So Martin, and I felt that the reason why the monsters didn't eat and kill Martin is that the worms inside of him, that he had special blood, and that you couldn't just kill him, that you have to let him actually rot to death, which is what they were doing to him. And it later turns out in the episode that the worms, it looked like it killed a monster. So that may be one of the reasons why Martin was sitting there hanging. And not only Martin, but if you remember, this is fascinating to me. The other monsters ignore Boyd, even though they could have killed him, and they surround the dead monster, which allows Boyd to run away. What's interesting to me is that, and you tell me that this scene is what to you, the monsters do not seem surprised about the dead monster.
Welcome back from Lee, and welcome to our sixth episode of The Watchers on the Wall. We are Patrick and Candace, two crows who like to sit at each watch by the sea and talk about our favorite, at this point, show, because we only talk about one show.
Yeah.
It's only what we have time for. So, this episode 6, is called Pas de Deux.
It's an interesting episode. Yeah. I think that it's going to be a polarizing episode for some people, because if you looked in the groups, if you looked online, the commentary about the show is really divided. Some people are loving the pacing. They're loving the way it's going. And then you have a select group of people as well who they don't like it.
It's not select. It's not select. You're making select sound like it's a small group. It's giving, what is it giving? It's reminding me of another show that we used to watch that was very polarizing as it...
You talking about the...
What was it called? It was an island and it was randomly moving.
Oh, Lord.
And two entities were like fighting. It was like a battle of good and evil. That show, I don't remember the name of it. I ain't got no comment.
We ain't gonna bring it up no more. But let's just delve right into it like we typically do. And we always pause and emphasize different points that we feel are important. So this episode starts off with Kenny and Boyd. I'm sorry, with Kenny's mother and Boyd. And they're talking in the diner. And Boyd is having that conversation with her. Basically letting her know, I had Sarah. I saved her. And she's back in the town. And he says a couple of
giving
things.
Him nothing. She's giving him... She's just sitting there like...
The look on her face is like, I got you. Next time we have tea, I'm putting something in your tea, goddammit. Yeah. That's what her face looked like. She's like, I got something in your tea next time we meet.
Because she got that hate in her heart.
Now she does.
Yeah.
But a couple of things that Boyd said that I think are worth mentioning. He says, since I got here, I have tried to make people feel safe. Then he says, things are changing. And if we don't use everything we have, I need to do whatever I can to get these people home. So he's basically saying that at this point of the game, we have to be willing to use whatever tools we have at our disposal to try to get out of here. And if that includes Sarah, that includes Sarah. And that's basically what he was saying. And as they're having that conversation, Kenny walks in and they have that awkward moment. And Kenny is like, why are you in here?
Yeah, he's not having it. He's walking into this conversation, and I guess he's knowing that Boyd is trying to apologize or explain his actions. And to Kenny, there's just no reason. There's not a big enough reason for you to be letting this person who's going around free. She's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I want to get back to what you were saying about Boyd, about how he was trying to get, making sure people were safe, and he wants to get these people home. But again, like I've been saying the last 6 episodes, everybody in Fromville needs to sit down and have this conversation. Okay, here's the plan. There's something going on. I want to get us all home. Jim is pretty much saying like, this is
a
something.
Game.
This is a game. Something's going on. Like the symbols, and Victor's being here the longest. Why not get everybody together and figure out what everybody knows? Where were you going? And try to compare notes. That is going to be the easiest way. Mm-hmm. So everybody's on one accord. We're all working toward getting home. Mm-hmm. So there won't be any panic when, there's going to be some panic, but everybody understands that we are working together on this one huge goal of getting everybody home. So we should not be panicking about, food. We need to use that energy to try to see how we can make sure we have enough food.
Yeah.
Or that, because something is controlling this and we're pissing it off, according to Donna. So, I mean, I know I'm rambling, but do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, they need to have the conversation.
There's no plan. You can't be the only person who knows the master plan.
Yeah, it's not only just that. It seems like everybody has their own plan. And when your resources are divided, then it's not going to work. Boyd is trying to work his plan. Jim is trying to work his plan. Victor's trying to work his plan. Shit, even Ethan's trying to work his plan. So let's,
Not the baby. Yeah, trying to figure out.
So we got to try to get it together. So Kenny walks in, and basically Boyd is trying to leave. And this is when we think Boyd has walked back into the church. But he hasn't. He actually is having like an hallucination. And in this hallucination, he walks into this church and it's empty. And he hears that music player playing. And then all of a sudden, this ballerina shows up and she is dancing. She eventually takes his hand and dances with him. And Boyd is just trying to figure out what's going on here. And then eventually she starts to turn into like a monster looking thing and spit out worms. And it ends, and then we see that Boyd has fallen on the floor of the diner, so he never left the diner. He was hallucinating. And this is when he falls, and Kenny picks him up, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And it looks like Boyd has hit the back of his head. And they're trying to get Boyd together. And this is when it transitions to back at the colony house, and they're taking food to the truck. This is the last of the potatoes, a man states. And he looks at Fatimata and he looks at Ellis and he says, "Hey guys, is there trouble in paradise?" And he becomes an interesting character this episode for a variety of different reasons. And there's a slight conversation going on, and Donna's like, "We need to keep this a secret." And they say, "How are we going to keep it a secret that we're running out of food?" And then she says, "Well, we're just going to tell the people that we're having a new system because we don't want the people to panic."
Hiding things does not work when you're trying to keep people from panicking. And I mean, like, that is the dumbest. I just don't understand that. I mean, why would the writers put that in? That is such an overused trope in these kinds of shows. We're not going to tell anybody because it's going to cause a panic. Does it have to? I mean,
I think it could cause a panic, and I can see why they would want to maybe kind of hide the information, and then somebody has to rationalize this thing, because whenever you're in a situation like this, and Boyd alluded to it earlier, you got to have somebody, and Boyd even said this, I think it was last episode, you have to have somebody in charge, even if the person in charge doesn't know what's going on, because everybody is looking for somebody to put some type of order in place so that people can kind of fall in. Whether we like it or not, people like structure, and they need to, set up this type of structure. But this is when it transitions to Christy. She's back in her dwelling, and she's looking at her hair in the mirror because her fiance, what's her name, Mari, has done her hair, and she's like, "You know what, let me pin it up, it's looking good." And she looks in Mari's bag, and she sees some paperwork for a rehabilitation center. This was really interesting because
that's where she was going.
That's where she was going. Rehab. And it's really interesting because a lot of people predicted that she looked like something was wrong with her. She looked like she might be a person that uses. And that's what we get confirmed here. But beyond that, I think something even more interesting is revealed. And Christy says, "You were doing so well." Meaning that Christy knows that she has had an addiction problem, and it seems like they had an addiction problem when they were together outside of From. So that is really interesting. When we see Christy run to the medicine cabinet, and she's looking inside of it, and she starts to move the things because she wants to hide them so that Mari can't access them anymore. And they have an emotional back and forth, and she's like, "Oh, do you think I'm a druggie or whatever?" And she says, I know, right?
Yes.
And then she said,
yes.
Did you use any of the medicine while you've been here? She's like, "Yes, I took some drops of the morphine." So we truly see that there is a challenge there, and that she actually is addicted to drugs, because there was a moment where I thought actually that Mari was maybe had an illness that required her to have medicines. But now we see that no, she is addicted.
And my thing with Christy, you knew before that she had substance abuse issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why why wouldn't you lock up that stuff ahead of time anyway?
Good question.
You saw her, yeah, you know what? Lock that up. You know that you're in a situation where you have a limited supply. You can't have a substance abuser walking around the clinic and all willy-nilly with access to precious medicines and drugs.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. So then it transitions to Kenny and Boyd. They're walking to the clinic, to get him some help. And we see Kenny tries to walk away from Boyd as Boyd tries to have like a conversation of trying to repair the relationship. But then Boyd starts to feel a burning sensation again. He says, Boyd tells Kenny that something happened in the forest. He says that worms are crawling underneath his skin. And he's starting to tell Kenny that something weird happened. And then he hears that music box playing again. And he walks around like a little corner, and the music box is playing. And then a ballerina comes out of like a storage room and it built into the ground. She walks by Boyd smiling, which I thought was interesting. And that's when Boyd says, do you see that? And Kenny's like, I don't see anything. So that lets us know Boyd is hallucinating again. It transitions to Colony House.
But this isn't the first time Boyd's been hallucinating.
Exactly.
He's been hallucinating Father Cautry as well. So
yeah. So it transitions to the Colony House preparing for the night. And Fatima and Ellis are still having tensions for some reason. And we kind of predicted this, and later on in the episode, it is revealed. But she's having tension, and she's acting haphazardly. Because you remember the last couple of episodes, she was acting haphazardly. And it is later revealed in this episode that she may be pregnant. So that is why she probably has had this shift in her behavior, and that she wants to get the hell out of this place. She's angry. She can't take it anymore because she doesn't want to bring a child into this environment. So Boyd is in the clinic, and he's talking to Chrissy, and he's telling her that what the man in the cave did to him. He's telling him that this man scratched me, put his worms in me. People are looking at Boyd like, bro, you are out of your mind. Boyd said the worms were feeding on him for years. They wouldn't let him die. Promise me you will put an end to things if it gets bad. I don't want to die like Martin. And this is interesting because one of my theories was accurate, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later on. Everybody was wondering why Martin was just sitting there hanging, and why the monsters wouldn't kill him.
And still no answer about how he got the rope
in
the well,
but so Martin, and I felt that the reason why the monsters didn't eat and kill Martin is that the worms inside of him, that he had special blood, and that you couldn't just kill him, that you have to let him actually rot to death, which is what they were doing to him. And it later turns out in the episode that the worms looked like it killed a monster. So that may be one of the reasons why Martin was sitting there hanging. And not only Martin, but if you remember, there was other skeletal remains hanging in chains, which means hypothetically that there was potentially other people with these monster killing worms in their bloodstream, but they rotted away. But we'll talk about that some more a little bit later. And he doesn't want to be left like Martin dying. Kenny and Chrissy are talking about the worms and not seeing them, basically, and how this, and Kenny makes a parallel and says, my dad, when his dementia started early on, he started to engage in the same type of behavior that he feels Boyd is starting to engage in, representing the Parkinson. And Chrissy says, look, man, I get it, but it's a little too soon for that, to have those type of hallucinations. This is when it transitions to the Matthew family's new house, and Donna's there, and they're making jars of food for rationing. one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, and Donna yells out, "Be careful with the tablespoons of salt because you don't want to ruin it because you want just a right amount of salt." But my question is, why would you have Ethan with such a strong responsibility in there putting the salt in the food when he could damage it? I didn't understand that, but it is what it is. This is when Jim says, we need to tell the people. Jim says it, this may all be part of it. And he says to increase the stress levels. And this is when Julie cuts him off and basically takes his mind off of what Jim was about to say, is that things are getting weirdly stressful because maybe they're trying to see our reactions.
And when I was watching it, I was like, shut up, Julie, shut up, let him finish.
Exactly. You know, because once Don is there, Jim is there, maybe a meaningful conversation can occur. Once again, Julie still doesn't look like she's told her husband that the monsters were in the cave. But moving on. So Boyd is back in the clinic. He has those burning sensations. He hears the music box and he sees the shadow of the ballerina. He runs over to pull the curtain behind to see her, and he doesn't see her, but then she runs behind him, grabs him, throws him on the big bed, and begins to choke him. But it's a dream. Chrissy's girl walks in. Boyd pulls out a gun on her, and that gun is important because he pulls out the gun and he sits it down on the counter, which we know somebody's going to pick it up a little bit later in the episode. Ellis and Fatima are talking. We're back at Colony House. Fatima is upset that he did not tell her about Sarah. But Ellis says, is it really about that? And she's getting ready to tell him something, but then they hear a fight occurring downstairs in the Colony House. It transitions to that argument in the kitchen. And that guy accuses Elgin of what? Stealing the food. And he says, we cannot have these new people stealing what food we have left. I thought this was fascinating because he says, then he tries to put the newcomers out of the Colony House in the middle of the night with the monsters. The thing is, we've never seen them go at each other because it was, to me, I was thinking as that was happening, I get the frustration that we're running out of food. But dude, nobody asked to fucking be here.
Yeah.
How are you going to act like people chose to be in Frumland? They didn't want to be here. They don't want to be eating up your rations. So to me, I'm like, bro, why are you doing that? But Ellis tries to calm him down, and he turns around wildly and stabs Ellis. To me, when I saw that scene, I was like, that's a little dramatic to me because that knife had to have been 5 or 6 inches. You ain't gonna accidentally plunge a knife 5, 6, 7 inches in nobody. Now, could you cut somebody turning around, swiping them, maybe nicking them? Yeah. But that knife went so deep that it literally looked like it pierced his lungs and everything. And to me, I just don't see how you turning around would cause your knife to go that deeply in somebody. Mm-hmm. Did he do it intentionally? Because he seemed to be kind of hating on Ellis anyway while they were outside. But I get... Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out. That was the same thing that happened with Sarah and her brother. It's like, why would a cutting of the knife be another way that you make something dramatic happen? Sarah accidentally sliced her brother's throat. Last season? And then we have a knife again, which is the primary catalyst for the things that are going to happen in the house. This is when it transitioned to Boyd. He's talking to Father Kotri, and they're looking in the cellar where Kenny's father is killed. Father Kotri says something interesting to me, which I wonder is this going to be. He says, "I'm proud of you. You are showing weakness and asking for help." Weird. Why?
That's a weird thing to say to somebody.
I mean, it's beyond weird. It's like, what is the point of saying that? But then Kenny walks in because he is overhearing Boyd literally have a full-fledged conversation in here. And Kenny's like, who the fuck are you talking to, dude? And then Boyd is like, I was talking to Father Kotri. And this is when Boyd tries to walk out, and Kenny's like, no, you're not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on. And this is when it transitions back to Ellis.
Kenny is basically trying to keep everybody upstairs safe because Boyd is acting really erratic.
irrationally. Yeah,
He's acting really erratic, and people like that, you can't have them around others. You don't know what they'll do, and it's the middle of the night. You
yeah.
know.
You can't just be doing that. So it transitions to Colony House, and Ellis is in bad shape. And this is when they decide, look, we can't wait till daylight. We got to get Ellis over here. And then Elgin, of all people, decides he's going to run outside and get a vehicle.
We don't have any more volunteers.
Yeah.
No more volunteers. Somebody who possibly knows where they're going in the dark.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I was like, dude, you're relatively new here, even though he says he's been there. You are the last person that needs to be driving around at night through the town.
I just knew, like, watching it, if you watch the scenes when they're cutting back between Ellis and Fatima and then Elgin, and Elgin's driving, it just looked like, and I don't know if it's because it was dark when we were watching it, but it just looked like they were gonna crash into something.
Yeah, I thought that they were gonna crash and then be stuck with the monsters, but I think that they gave us a valuable piece of information. You can hear monsters screaming and screeching, but then the humanoid ones are still quiet and walking and just talking. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if there are two sets of monsters, right? Because why are we hear the screeching all of a sudden again? Because to me, the screeching is more intimidating in some ways than just the talking. The talking is creepy and scary, but that screeching really lets you know that something is here.
Remember, we saw a different type of monster when Tabitha and Victor were underground, under the, I guess you can say, in the cavern under the house, and they looked more monstrous than humanoid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they almost look like what they look like when they're not in a human form, maybe. But it was so dark in the cave.
Yeah, and one of the monstrous ones killed Bob the bartender. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, Bob the bartender.
R.I.P. Bob the bartender.
Exactly.
Gone too soon.
So they arrive at the clinic, and Ellis is still having difficulty breathing, and they know that they're going to have to do something incredibly quick and important. So they work on Kenny's chest, putting a hole in it to empty the blood that was filling up in his chest cavity, preventing him from breathing. This is when they say, okay, the procedure was a success, but Ellis has lost so much blood that we need to have a transfusion. And they're like, Boyd, you're the perfect candidate because of your blood type. But Boyd says, I don't want to transfer my blood in my son with these damn worms in my skin.
That might have been a good idea.
Because, we don't know.
I mean...
So this is when Kenny busts out that gun, and he's like, get your ass on the table so we can do this blood infusion.
I'm sorry. Shout out to Kenny. I love where they're taking Kenny. This is like, remember I was watching this show, and Kenny pulled out that gun, and I was just like, hot. Kenny is hot. So
yeah, hot. Kenny's
he's
trying
hot. That's so hot.
Yeah, Kenny's trying to turn it up for the people. But this is when the worms finally appear. How convenient. They finally appear for everybody to see that Boyd is actually not crazy.
Why they could see them now. Like,
yeah, because he's been feeling them and burning for like the longest, and now they can finally see them, which is pretty interesting. But this is when they say, okay. And then Kenny says, well, why don't you pass your blood on to me and get the worms out? And that's when it triggers a thought in Boyd. He says, what if? And then Boyd says, what if we can pass them on to the right person? Boyd walks outside the clinic. He tossed the monsters to come out. And Smiley comes out first. And he's smiling. And then the other monsters start to appear. This was a creepy scene. Because when I saw all of those monsters appear, I was like, damn, is Boyd going to make it out of this? Because even if he's able to infect one of them, shit, you got 10 other monsters around you. Boyd cuts his hand with a knife. He cuts Smiley's neck and grabs him by the neck, transferring the worms. Now, we both were like, what is that sound? Because it almost sounded like electricity was transferring when he was grabbing the worms. I was like, damn, is this a robot that he's grabbing around the neck? Or was that just the sound effect that they chose to use for the worms moving into his skin? This is when Smiley has a smile on his face, seeming unaffected. And then he says, I'm loving this game. But then all of a sudden, that's when we see Smiley start to lose his humanoid form, and he starts dying. This is fascinating to me. The other monsters ignore Boyd, even though they could have killed him, and they surround the dead monster, which allows Boyd to run away. What's interesting to me is that, and you tell me that it seems this way to you, the monsters do not seem surprised about the dead monster. They look and they walk away.
It reminded me of something you see in a video game.
What you mean?
Like when you do something, like you beat something, and then all the obstacles kind of just like move away. I don't even.
Because what it made me think, two things came to my mind when I saw that. The first thing is, have the monsters seen another monster be killed before? That's number one. Quite possibly, because we had our boy Martin with the worms. He was locked up, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier. He was locked up in that cave, and they were letting him rot to death. They didn't kill him, because probably if they bit him or something, the worms get into him, and now it kills one of the monsters. So, is it possible that the monsters have seen other monsters be killed? And that's why they knew, let me leave Boyd alone, let me walk on about our business. Is that why they also had a stoic look on their face when their buddy Smiley got killed? You know, and it, like I said, it brings me to my point that I was making earlier, that I think that there were other people with this special blood, and it is used to maybe combat these monsters. How many was it? We don't know. How did they get it? We don't know yet. But I think that we're definitely going to see people investigate how did they get that. One other final point about this. Isn't it interesting that Boyd discovers that these things can be killed? He was also the person that discovered the talisman in season 1. Boyd, for some reason, seems to be the chosen one when it comes to figuring out these things.
But never mind.
So Boyd goes back in and they start the transfusion process. For some reason, they show Chrissy's girlfriend walk away to claim that she's going to go get additional sheets, and she's looking at that medicine cabinet, staring at it hard. She wants some of them drugs. It transitions to Donna and Ethan. They're talking in the basement of the home after they're putting up the food and things like that. And Ethan tells Donna he's scared and he doesn't want to go on a quest anymore and he wants to go home. This is interesting to me, because I think Ethan, this whole quest thing, he seemed like he was willing to go on this journey and actually was looking forward to the journey. We now see him no longer interested in this quest stuff. Is it going to play a big part? Is that going to do something? This is when we see Donna. She says something I think is important as well. She says, I'm scared too, and that is a good thing. And she makes reference to how fear at times can be a good motivating factor for survival and help people get through tough times. I think that those statements are going to be powerful for some reason, because why else would they be just saying that, and they spend so much time with them in that part of the house. Boyd is in the clinic and Ellis and Fatima is by his side. Fatima gets up to have a moment to process what she's been experiencing the last couple of hours, feeling like she was going to lose Ellis. Christy walks over and she eventually asks Christy, do you have a pregnancy test? Indicating that a lot of our theories and guesses that somebody was going to get pregnant are coming to fruition. As it relates to the pregnancy thing, why haven't people in Colony House been pregnant before? We've seen many episodes where people are sleeping, having sex, and different things are going on in the house. Why is this the first pregnancy? They've talked about how, and Victor's talked about it, the things are changing. The leaves are changing. Not the trees are moving this time, but specifically saying the leaves are changing. Boyd said the same thing when he was walking with Kenny. I've never seen the leaves fall off of the trees like this before. So things are changing for some reason. You know, is that why Fatima is able to get pregnant? Is that why Boyd was able to get these worms? Is that why a lot of the things that we've seen happen are happening? This is when it transitions to Kenny and Boyd, and they're staring at the monster. Kenny says, I should have believed you and listened to you. To me, indicating that seemingly that a repair of their relationship is about to happen. And Kenny seeming to understand why now leaving Sarah alone and leaving her to live might now be necessary. Now, it's time to transition into how many cans of peaches would we give this episode. You want to go ahead and start off? And then, of course, it's on a rating scale of 0 to 5. How many cans of peaches?
I'm gonna give this episode 3 cans of peaches. And let me just say that at this point, the only thing that's saving this show for me is the acting. There's nothing that is moving this plot forward. Nothing gripping to that is moving the plot forward. It just feels like we get different questions every single episode and no other questions answered. And it's not like these things are happening and they're not major. They are major things that you need to answer. You can't just skip over them. And I just feel like, you know, the writing this season has been really, I don't know. It just seems like, did ChatGPT write this season? I stop laughing. No, I don't know. Like, the only thing to me is what's making this show worth continuously watching is the acting. The acting is really, really good. And I feel bad for the actors because they are not really given much. But what they're given, they are acting the hell out of it. I mean, I gotta say that. There are no actors on this show that are lacking. I mean, nobody. And I'm just kind of like, if they had some great writing, better show running, I just.
All right, so I would give the episode 3.5 cans of peaches. Honestly, I was expecting a tad bit more because some of the bigger YouTube channels and vloggers and stuff like that, people that have early access to shows, they could feel the restlessness that a lot of people were having. So they kept saying, hold on to episode 6, hold on to episode 6, hold on to episode 6. So then episode 6 is here. And we got some answers. We see people having conversations.
What answers? We didn't get any answers to anything.
We see that the blood in Boyd's bloodstream could be a positive thing. It has an impact. I always thought that it was going to be beneficial in some way. So we see that. That's kind of number one. We see why Fatima's behavior is the way it is. Number 2. Number 3, we see the girlfriend. We know that she's now addicted to drugs, and not only is she addicted to drugs, but it's been a struggle or something she's been fighting for some time, which is interesting. So we're getting information, but like you said, we're also getting more and more details that require more and more answers. So that's why I want to give it a 3.5. Was I expecting more? And I'm not one of the people that wants to see the monsters all the time. I don't need to see the monsters all the time. I don't need to see them ripping people apart all the time, because I think then the monsters lose their cool and wow factor when they do show up, when every time they're showing every episode. But the way they built this up from all the reviewers and stuff like that, I was expecting more. I even had a chance to see the script maybe 5 days before this episode dropped. I chose not to read it because I was like, let me just wait to see what happened. But I will say that they fooled the shit out of us, because I thought Randall was going to be the one to I thought he was going to be instrumental in the killing of the monster.
I guess that was a red herring.
Yeah.
Or maybe a change. Maybe they, a lot of times shows do different types, do different edits of things. Maybe they changed it last minute. I don't know.
I still think that he's going to play a part, because I think that he's some type of hunter or something. It did say that, he had a long rifle. And typically speaking, a lot of times people with long rifles, they hunt. To me, it looked like he was building some kind of a trap. I think he's one of those outdoorsman type people that likes to hunt and trap things. And I think that his skill set is going to become valuable pretty soon. What are your thoughts on the episode? How many cans of peaches would you give this episode, and why? What did you like about the episode? What questions do you have? What are you expecting or looking forward to discovering and learning about in episode 7? Thank you guys for tuning in. This one was a little bit long, but it was a lot to discuss with this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And hopefully we will see you guys midweek or either next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye-bye.